last year for lithium, there was money all over the place. This year for uranium, all over the place. And mark this on. Next year for gold, we can have another interview. I can tell you, like, as soon as interest rates come down, give them 3-4 months, gold is going to rally like crazy and people are going to come back to gold. It's the same. And really, this gold thing repeats every time there is a recession. There is a bull market. There has to be consolidation. We cannot have 10 companies paying for 10 CEOs and 10 CFOs. We need to have one. And once that happens, and instead of having 1,000 companies, we have like 30, then the money will be allocated to the 30 companies that can actually execute a plan and that are not going to be sitting down in the chairs without doing anything. We need to create wealth, and that is by transforming dirt into prosperity. Invest in more advanced projects. If it's a matter of, it's capital allocation. You have to choose when you have to allocate your capital.
All right, Jose. Top of mind is, unfortunately, as of the last few days, a disaster, and that's not just a figure of speech. So a massive landslide basically has happened at a Turkish mine that's operated by SSR Mining. It's a Canadian company. I'll put up the video for people to see if they still have it. I'll put it up on the screen. It's bad. Is really only one way to put it, I guess. Especially considering that people are missing, lives are endangered, and it's not looking too good for the whole situation. Definitely not looking too good for the company, considering that this is one of SSR's main assets. 20-year mine life, 3 million ounces in reserves. So it's a gold mine. It's no wonder the stock has taken as big of a hit as it has, really, especially considering that this is not the first time this mine is causing issues over recent past. So to me, that was a reminder that mining is hard. It's a risky and a dangerous business, but nobody's here for my opinion. So what do you make of all this, Jose?
Well, first of all, I'm really sorry for what has happened to SSR and to the people that were around there and that were damaged by that. And certainly, that's first thing to be said is we don't want to have any lives being lost in any industry. And that certainly reminds us that mining is not easy. Also remind us of if standards were followed and if protocols were followed and the engineering was well done or not. But I think that that's not my job to criticize because I don't know how that was done. I want to assume that they follow the right protocols, and sometimes, unfortunately, these casualties happens, and let's hope that there was no human mistakes and that it was really something unfortunate.
Yeah. It's I obviously nothing to disagree with there. I have no idea if it was or it wasn't a human mistake. We've seen them make a mistake before too, though. So that's one thing. Do you think this whole thing hurts the global mining industry and maybe even the appetite for investment in our space and that stuff like that generally? Well, I mean, that's why mining maybe doesn't have too good of a name.
Well, mining is complicated by its nature. No? I mean, we have had underground mines for plenty of years, and it's not an easy job, certainly. And unfortunately, we have gained a reputation not by great things, although a lot of great things has been done, but we don't talk about them. We don't talk about the largest flotation plant being built in Peru by the Americans by Freeport, and we don't talk about the turning from sewage to clean water in Arequipa in Peru by Freeport and Buenaventura. We don't talk about El Teniente being the largest underground mine, almost like an open pit. But of course, when there is a casualty, we're all talking about it. And I guess that is human nature. That's why a lot of people are mentally sick because we keep thinking about the bad things that are happening instead of, the good things that has been happening to us day and day, every single day.
Hmm.
And that is a problem that we have as a society in a sense.
Hmm.
I'm not dismissing what happened. I'm just saying that there are so many things to be said about mining, said about the wealth that has been created the conversion from dirt to prosperity that has been happening in mining, and we don't put it into context at all.
Yeah. Well, I didn't come here for life lessons, but now you're helping me sort of don't focus on the negative, focus on the positive. It's a good point because we do talk about when there's lives lost. We do talk about it a lot. We don't really necessarily talk about the lives that are saved. And I watched a very good speech by Peter Monk from maybe 10 years ago or something like that, where he was talking about mining really not only bringing prosperity to regions, but oftentimes bringing um, sort of a will to live, if you will. You know, it brings meaning to the people's lives to have something else to do. That was a good speech. It's a good point, but then at the same time, it's interesting to me because it's exactly stuff like this that environmental groups get hung up on, and maybe I mean, do you really expect anything else, right? And
Well, I mean, the reality is that, I mean, I think we have spoken about this before. As a public traded company, we are in a sense blessed by the fact that anyone can see who are our investors, at least the major ones. You can immediately go and see, oh, okay, Franklin Templeton has invested in your company, or Van Eck has invested in your company, or Cisco has an investment in your company. But the downside on the environmental groups is that we don't even know who are their investors, and why are they really claiming for all these environmental impacts. And in most cases, and I don't want to get into a rabbit hole, but there is a narrative that it is a campaign by extremist groups from the extreme left that are colored themselves in green when they're really very red. So, and that is a narrative that has been winning all over the world, starting in Iran. So you have Iran, and you have turning around, and you go into Syria, and you go south to Latin America, and then you have Venezuela, and then you turn a little bit more to the north, and you have Nicaragua, and then you go a little bit north, and you have now Mexico being tainted.
yeah.
So, it's really interesting how this operative has been working. When we look into all the manifestations happening in Bolivia, they are being sponsored by Iran. And then the spectrum of what we're talking about is it's much more complicated than if we're really talking about environment. And I'm not dismissing what happened in Turkey, and has been sad, and I'm really sorry for what happened. But when we talk about environmental groups, I mean, it's there is a hidden agenda there that I have not been able to completely unreveal, but I am convinced that there is an extremist narrative behind it.
Yeah, it's the watermelon governments and watermelon corporations all over again. They're sort of green on the outside, red on the inside, as you said. And that's actually reminding me of what's been happening in Panama. There's been a lot of talk around that potentially being the same type of issue, a watermelon issue, if you will, because it's now been 2 months after the mine shut down, the Cobre Panama mine, and it's not only a significant mine for First Quantum, the company that owns and operates the asset, but it's also significant for the entire country of Panama, given that this mine alone accounts for more than 5% of the country's GDP. Actually, I looked it up, and almost 1% of the country's population worked directly at that mine. And it's also obviously a globally significant asset to the copper market too. And yet the issue has not yet been resolved. And Panama is now close to elections, by the way, as you might know, and I believe in 3 months or so. So it'll make sense if yeah. I don't know. It would make sense to me if there's a regime change and if that watermelon government moves away. But what do you make of this this whole thing that's kept on happening since we last spoke?
I guess that shows us that in order to be a populist, you don't really need to be from the extreme left or center. You can be of the right as well, and it's not good. I know very little about the government of Panama. But I would have not considered that government a government that was leaning towards the left.
Yeah.
But certainly this move, particularly with Cobre Panama, is a populist movement, 1,000%. And what has done with Panama is it has damaged Panama in a very big way. I mean, the rule of law has been destroyed now. So it does not affect, and that is part that people don't quite understand. This is not a matter of an environmental thing. If there is an environmental sanction that has to be put, that goes to the Ministry of Mines, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Law, Labor, whatever you want to call it. When you do something like what they have done, they have broke the rule of law. That means that now everyone that has a business in Panama should be very worried. Because at any moment, the government may decide, hey, you have textiles. Sorry, my friend, but now that's us. Or, hey, you have cattle. Too bad for you. Or you have now your beautiful hotels in front of the ocean and c'est la vie, now it's mine. I think the precedent that this government has set in Panama, it's very, very bad. And I think that, people knows that. And this is not, again, this particular issue is not a mining issue. There is a narrative behind that. There is other interests being built and created there. I'm not from Panama. I don't know what extra things this guy was looking for. But if it was money, that was already agreed. They were going to pay more taxes. So now it's not money. And environmentally, so far, I think they were following the best protocols that could have been followed. And they were, giving good jobs, and people were having better lives because of that.
Yeah.
And Panama was attracting a lot of mining companies to do exploration, which now they probably are flying out.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. It's what I sort of, it was sort of a word salad as to what I said back there, but what my thought was behind it is sort of that we don't even have a left or leftist government in Panama right now, and this is happening. What if elections come and the government starts leaning more towards the left? Is First Quantum completely done for?
Well, I mean, that's why there is international law. And as long as that at least is there is a hope. But if the issue we're facing right now in Latin America, and it's unfortunate that the United States, particularly United States and Canada, is not taking enough attention, is that we are having now a lot of narco states being built. Starting with Bolivia, with Evo Morales, now with his puppet in power, but it's managed by Evo Morales and financed by Iran. Following through that, we had the same thing in Peru with Pedro Castillo. Thanks God he shoot himself by himself, essentially trying to do a coup d'etat, and he went to jail because he did a coup d'etat, and he was sent to jail because that was the law was ordering. But then you go into Colombia, again into the idea of the non-democracy and the narco states and the autocracy. And then you keep going to Ecuador, where the president was fired, called for new elections. Well, the extreme left of Correa didn't win, but they were extremely close, and they are still making a lot of revolutions there. And then you go into Venezuela, and then as you keep going north, now you are seeing this in Nicaragua, and then Panama. And then you start thinking, and Cuba, of course, it's the intellectual knowledge of all this narrative. I mean, the socialism of the 21st century. It's not something that just happened today. I mean, this started since Grupo de Sao Paulo 20, 30 years ago, and was supported by the Kirchners initially, that stayed in power for a long time and managed. I mean, Argentina managed to stay alive because it's such a rich country. I mean, let's not forget Argentina was the 5th largest power in the 1950s. So, these anti-democratic regimes are gaining a lot of power in Latin America. And in a sense, if it's not reviewed, seen, at least, if we don't have someone bigger like Canada or the States, essentially saying, guys, I mean, you can choose whomever you want as long as is democratic. But the thing is that we're moving to a place where we might not control that, and it's being paid by Iran. Like we keep forgetting about that part. Like, what happened in the Middle East, it's not a concept. It's not minimal. And this is not Israel. This is Iran and Syria and Jordan and Egypt. I mean, there is a very big thing there that is pushing to Latin America, is pushing into Europe, and I don't want to sound Machiavellicus, but it's there. We don't want to see it, fine, but it's there. All what is happening in Latin America is being supported by Iran.
Yeah, kind of like gangrene. It starts at the pinky, and then you might end up losing an arm. So it's and you say that it's moving north. Actually, I don't know if this is the same issue, but there is something that happened this week that caught my attention even more north of Panama, and that's Mexico. Mexico's president has just proposed a few changes to the country's constitution. That was what the headlines were, but it's much worse than just that. Because one of them includes an outright ban on open pit mining, mainly on the grounds of it using too much water. For, if people are following the avocado mafia, that won't come as a surprise. Sure, there is, mining uses a lot of water. There really is a water issue in Mexico, and so on and so forth. But that still doesn't change the fact that the Mexican economy is heavily dependent on mining it, and open pit mining in particular. I believe the biggest mines in the country are open pit. So, I mean, what do you think? Is this ban gonna pass through? Or are we gonna be seeing more of this political behavior around the northern part of the world? Or how do you look at this?
Anything that will bring prosperity to the extreme left narrative, let's call it for a second, it will be in danger. And the reason why is because the only way how the narco states can exist is without having prosperity, because then you depend on the narco states. And that is AMLO, that is López Obrador. Or López Obrador represents the anti-system. López Obrador represents the anti-democracy. López Obrador represents the narcos and the narco states. And he will use a narrative of the environment, sure. And he will use a narrative of the very big whites and the browns, and the very big rich and the poor, and the guys that do the right things and the poor that don't do anything, and the guys that has education and the ones that don't have education. It's known. It's everywhere. It has been like this in Venezuela, happened like that in Cuba. Now they're pushing it to Mexico. The only sort of quasi blessing that Mexico has is just being very close from the United States. So I don't think people will be so easily convinced. However, I mean, what AMLO did and the changes that he did in constitution allows him to start giving money. And when people gets money, gets excited, and they fall into a trap of this guy is giving me free money, and there is no free lunch. There's no free lunch. And again, López Obrador represents part of this socialism of the 21st century. López Obrador, together with Ortega, it was the Kirchners, it was Evo Morales, Rafael Correa, all these guys. They were the very big buddies. So it's not a coincidence. I mean, this thing of the open pit mining, this is not mining. This is politics. This is geopolitical in hardcore, because this is the best way that Iran and their friends of Cuba and Venezuela, which is now running out of money. So at the end, the only one that is left is Iran, and in somewhat maybe Russia, but I don't have any certainty of that. So I'd rather leave Russia out of the equation, are penetrating into the states, trying to break it. Simple.
Well, as you said, in Panama, though, it's the same. It's not on environmental ground or on mining grounds or whatever. It's a political thing. Yet the mine is shut off. First Quantum is suffering because of that. Are we going to be seeing some of that in Mexico too? Like, is that an actual possibility, or because of its proximity to the U.S., we wouldn't?
I hope we don't. Due to the proximity to the U.S., if it ever happens, it will be reversed. I don't know if international courts, international law will allow that to happen, to be seen. But it is very clear to me that all this is a geopolitical narrative, that it is working in that regard, and all what they are trying to do is to break democracy and bring the narco states, and we are just trying to cover our eyes, saying that, well, I don't see that. Like, oh, I know that's environmental, that's Mexico, that's just AMLO protecting the environment. That's not true. AMLO doesn't protect the environment. AMLO doesn't protect the poor. AMLO doesn't care about anything by himself. Like, I don't know if someone has been checking his accounts, but I'm sure now there are millions of dollars being collected already by all the narcos that are paying him.
That's a statement. But what do you? So what?
Well,
What do
someone
I?
has to do that. I don't have ground to say that. Right? I just have the impression.
But and what do I do with all that as an investor when it comes down to South America? Because there's a bunch of cheap companies out there, almost too many to start counting. But are they undervalued or are they cheap for a reason?
Well, I think as an investor, you would look it on, first of all, on a country by country basis, and then who has more access to or closer to democracy. Whomever has less of a taint of being close to a narco state will get a higher price, and that will be the reason for people investing in places like the US and Canada. At the end, I mean, why are investors coming back to the States in mining? Mining was not that big in the US. Now everyone goes to the US. Doesn't matter if they're paying $1,000 per meter in Nevada. They still prefer the US. So it's high risk, high reward. You like, if we want to compare Latin America, then we have to see what is a comparison in a place in Africa. It is what it is, or a place in the Middle East. Would you go to Pakistan? Why not? Why would you go to Venezuela? Same thing. Would you go to Iran? Yeah. Then places like Peru, yeah, it is unstable, but we had the same constitution since 1992, and whomever we had presidents from the left, but they were not able to destroy the country because the constitution didn't allow them to do it. But if that constitution is broken, the country is dead, and that's what happened in Venezuela. That's what has been trying to happen in Mexico. That happened in Nicaragua. That happened in Bolivia. At the moment you change the rule of the game to your favor, where the institutions are not impartial, country is gone.
Which, and if you could get specific, that'd also be appreciated. But which countries do you think in South America are more exposed to that risk than others?
Bolivia, Venezuela, particularly.
Okay. Bolivia's challenging.
I think Colombia will survive. But this, if something, should have taught us as Latin Americans, and I was born in Peru, so I guess I although I live in Canada, but should told us that we as business community need to be involved in politics. We cannot be, shutting the door because it will impact us.
It's sort of the grim view, if you will, that you have on South America is interesting to me because we're seeing a lot of capital is flowing there. I mean, the Lundins oftentimes considered the smartest guys in the room. They're operating in Argentina, Chile, in the Vicuña district. And so it seems like the mineral endowment there is enough for them to want to deal with the politics. So how do you see those regions and their investments?
Well, listen, if you look at things in the long term, probably it's the right investment. Again, it's high risk, high reward. You want to make 100% yearly, and then suddenly 1 year you will not see anything. Yeah, that's an option, or a risk of nothing. But I mean, if you trust where you are investing, the Landins did great in Ecuador, and they bet for it, and they ace it. They did so well, and they tried it again in Guatemala, and they did it so well. I mean, so maybe they have a secret sauce, and maybe it's an expertise for sure. It's an expertise. I mean, Chile, see, like, the reason why Chile was able to survive is because they had a referendum. So whatever was left from the institutions that the extreme left with Boric wanted to destroy, they called for a for a referendum, and the changing constitution didn't win, but they tried. They tried to do exactly what they did in Cuba, and exactly what they did in Venezuela, and what they did in Bolivia. They changed the constitutions to a point that it appears like a democracy, but they're managing everything.
You make a very good point when you say, over the long term, it's probably a smart investment. And when we talk about the Lundins and long term, we're not talking 3 to 5 years. We're talking 20,
20, 30
50,
years.
next generation type of thing.
Yeah.
And that's where the difference is between me and billionaires, besides them having $1 billion more than I do, is their time frame, because they can afford to be there for 20 or 50 years or something like that. So it's a very good point. How do other, because you talk to major and big capital deployers in the space much more than I do. How's the rest of them dealing? I mean, you're close to the Cisco guys, obviously. How do big capital deployers look at all that, and what around the growing red tape around the globe and all the other issues? Because where I'm coming from with this is because M&A has again been slow for the last couple of months. So yeah, talk to me about how big capital is being deployed.
Well, the success of our founders at Cisco was, kind of going back to their roots. They started doing exploration in Africa, and the three of them, Sean Rusen, John Borsinski, and Bob Wares, decided to go back to Canada, to their own country, and that's when Canadian Malartic was, in quote unquote, rediscovered, drilled, and put into production, and that's where their fortune was made. And subsequent to that, keep pushing for the same thing, and then Windfall was discovered, and then the B.Sc asset, Barkerville, was rediscovered in a sense, and now is one of the largest deposits. And Marban has been now part of that discussion, and Garrison has been part of that. I mean, if something I can say about these three gentlemen is the fact that they have been stellar on identifying assets in safe jurisdictions that maybe are not in production today, but will be in production in the next 5 or 10 years. And then a lot of money will be made in a safe jurisdiction, in a jurisdiction where the rule of law is present, where changes are not dramatical, and where there is support for an industry that has built so much, have brought so much wealth. And there is no a shame of it. Sometimes in Latin America, it almost feels that, we talk about mining and we feel we're doing something wrong. But I mean, Canada is one of the largest mining countries in the world, and people feel proud about it. And the same about the States. I mean, the wealth of these two countries was built around it. I mean, we just saw the Super Bowl recently, and we talk about the 49ers only as the 49ers. That was the build of the 49ers was 1849, when the rush of gold happened in San Francisco, and where most of the buildings and the infrastructure was built with gold, with mining, with Noah Shameless. Like we were talking about before, about the unfortunate situation in Turkey. Well, let's talk about the positive side of things. A lot of infrastructure has been built with mining. A lot of wealth has been brought through mining. A lot of education has been brought through mining. So, I mean, there is plenty of good things that has been brought with mining, not only gold, copper, silver, lead. I mean, in our history, talking about Mexico or Peru, the Incas and the Aztecas knew about mining through those times. And no one was telling them, don't do that. So, it's just a matter of how responsible we're going to be doing it. And how much we're going to be dragged by this narrative of don't do anything. We don't need more. Oh, you don't need more. But how are you making your call? Sorry, you're using a cell phone, and that's an iPhone. And by the way, here is more than 101 elements that has been mined. Sorry, brother, but I mean, that is reality. So if you're going to tell me that we're going to be complaining about mining, let's start being very reasonable.
Yeah, we should be proud, and some people are proud, but that doesn't necessarily translate into appetite for investment in the mining space. You see the generalist investors in Canada, say the Canadian pension funds, widely discussed these days too. Um, do you think they will eventually be able to see through these risks and propaganda?
1,000%. That people are ready to deploy money in debt, not in equity.
How come?
Less risk. I'll give you $1 billion in debt. Pay me my interest rates, but don't make me put $300 million there only as equity.
Yeah.
I need to show money. I need to give dividends to my shareholders. I'll charge you 15%. I'll pay 5% or 6%, whatever is the inflation, and then I will distribute some. I get everyone happy. So that means that projects that are more advanced, closer to debt, or closer to being production, so they can be subject to debt, will do fine. The issue is for the people that are doing exploration, the people that don't have resources. Those are the companies that are going to suffer the most because there is no appetite for risk. And risk money only happens when there is an overflow of money, which has not happened. If we think about COVID, people get out of money during COVID and got in cash right away and said, let's wait. Suddenly people called COVID away, money went back into the tech. And you see what happened with the 7 big ones. The 7 big ones flew like a rocket back into the same levels as today. Then we have been facing the increasing interest rates. Again, people sell, keep the cash, now waiting for investments. But not into, oh, let's see what's going to happen. And you can compare this to any of the R&D from technology. How much money is put right now into R&D? You want to compare exploration compared to how much money is put in R&D? Nothing. It's not mining. It's risk money has not been deployed.
Yeah. It's a very good point, because a friend of mine, Kai Hoffman of SOAR Financially, he gave a very good presentation at the Vancouver Resource Conference saying that we have raised a bunch of money last year. So there is money for mining. It's not when people say, oh, there's no money in mining. There is money in mining, but most money went to, they were tracking specifically developers and late stage explorers. Right. And I suppose you could make the argument that this means be greedy when others are fearful of the early stage explorers. They are fearful you be greedy on them and discovery plays and stuff like that. But then again, their stocks are at 52 weeks low, and because of that, their cost of capital is through the roof, and the dilution risk is higher than ever, which it already typically is high. So the point here is that there is a bottleneck for early stage explorers here, and I'm kind of conflicted. I feel like they are cheap, sure, but again, the risks are there, and you stack that on top of the geographical risk that we just talked about. And so the question is kind of like, how do I deal with that bifurcation that is present, and that there is no capital in the early stage explorers?
Invest in more advanced projects. If it's a matter of, it's capital allocation, you have to choose when you have to allocate your capital. In my view, if I have $50,000, I would rather put that money into companies that has already a resource. And unless it's a slam dunk, and one of these guys, there is this group out of I think the Yukon, that they had like 100 meters or 150 meters of a gram.
Yeah.
Go and invest there. I mean, that's certainly something that will pan out. So that shows you, Snowline, I think it's called. That shows you that it's not there is no money for anyone. The money will go to only very particular people that are extremely good on what they do. We have raised $100 million with our group. We raised $40 million for Silver Mountain Resources, that it's a mine that will be in production by the end of December in Peru. We have raised another $50 million or 60 even in O3 mining, and another couple $1 million for electric elements. So I mean, saying that there is no money, I don't think it's totally or 100% right. I mean, there is way less money, and only for very few groups. And certainly there is a lot of money for critical elements. Like if you ask about anyone about uranium stocks, I mean, everyone wants to invest there. Now, how good they're going to be, for how long they're going to last, I don't know. But last year, for lithium, there was money all over the place. This year for uranium, all over the place. And mark this on. Next year for gold, we can have another interview. I can tell you, like, as soon as interest rates come down, give them 3-4 months, gold is going to rally like crazy, and people are going to come back to gold.
You mentioned critical minerals, and that's a very interesting point, because I was just thinking, what is the role of the government in here, though, in Canada specifically? I mean, we see them supporting. Just the other day, I read an article, and I'll quote something out of here, if you don't mind. But Canada says that they quote, Canada plans to boost its energy security by slashing the time it takes to develop new critical mineral mines by nearly a decade with improved permitting processes. The energy minister said, Jonathan Wilkinson is his name, I believe, unquote. And so for Ottawa specifically, that includes lithium, graphite, nickel, cobalt, copper, and so on and so forth, and rare earths, of course. And oftentimes, putting the emphasis on China's role in the supply of in the supply chain of rare earths, but that's already kind of a done deal. I mean, announcing that they'll be thinking, this is not an article that says, oh, they're already cutting the times or something. They're like, oh, we'll start thinking about how to potentially fix the issue of extensively long permitting periods 10 years ago. The 10 years in the future, I mean. But that might have helped if they did it in the past, but they're only now waking up to that fact when it's again a done deal, trying to fix what's broken instead of prevent the break in the first place. So again, I'm talking too much, but I may be maybe also just being too much of an internet head, angry at the government for no reason. And why I'm bringing this up is because it's reminding me of the permitting risks and the permitting time, and that time in the mining space, in the development space, is money, because you have to keep the company alive and you have to keep developing, and that costs you in dilution. And so I suppose the question here would be, do you ever see the government of Canada, or the US for that matter, actually working alongside explorers and developers rather than against them?
Let's hope so. At the end, they should. And will be a smart thing to do. And I don't think they are too late. They could have been earlier, but it's not too late. I mean, when did China start investing in copper mines in Latin America? 20 years ago. 20. I mean, one of the largest copper mine in Peru is Chinese. And if you start looking into all these smaller miner groups in Peru are Chinese money. And that goes back to what we were talking before at the very beginning of our conversation. I don't think this is a matter of if you are right from the right or from the left, if you are capitalist or socialist. This has to do if you believe in democracy or not, if you believe in autocracy or not, if you believe in the respect of life in general, yes or no. And China doesn't fit into that idea. Capitalist, yes, but respect of democracy, respect of the rules, respect of the people, respect of the rights, zero. And where are they in as part of that on a geopolitical standpoint of view? Together with Iran and together with Nicaragua and together with Jordan and Syria. I mean, it's immediate where you see the world and with whom they team up. The next part will be, okay, who has nuclear power? And then you go back to the same thing. China, Iran, North Korea, Russia. 4 with nuclear powers. Who do you have on the other side? The US and Israel. Now you see all the shit show.
So I guess I see the issue, but what's the solution might be more of an interesting discussion from an investment perspective, because Canada is surely trying some kind of a solution by keeping the Chinese out of there. But I mean, is that doing more good than is doing bad? I don't know. What do you think?
Canada needs to keep accelerating all the permitting process and allow them to be independent from those sources. Canada has the luxury of having every single metal that you can imagine in the earth, from nickel to cobalt to silver to gold, from oil to gas to whatever you want to name it. Now it really depends on us as Canadians, and I include myself now that I live here and I have a passport to defend this country from this narrative of don't do anything, because not doing anything will not solve anything. We need to create wealth, and that is by transforming dirt into prosperity.
That's one way to put it, transforming dirt into prosperity. It's true though, and it's not Trudeau. It's true though. But that's you know what, I like seeing that kind of articles because it shows you that there is hope. But they're talking about critical metals specifically. That's a list, an exhaustive list that they created themselves. When I say they, I mean the government in this case.
Great. Let them talk about something at least. It's mining. It's fine. Let's talk about critical metals for now. And, you know, as soon as that happens, it will flow the rest of it. Well, let's not get stuck into it. If they are moving critical metals, great. Let's start by something. For the past 10 years, we have not been pushing for anything. Pushing for critical metals is a very big advance, especially considering the limited mind of this government.
Well, why I bring this up is because I'm sort of approaching this from the perspective of a bag holder, if you will, because I'm thinking about what's happening with gold, where it keeps trading in this $100 range, and it has been really, if you eliminate the blips for the last year, somewhat stayed in that range between 1950 and 2050. It is up quite a lot, bottoming out at around 1650 about a year and a half ago. But at the same time, most companies in my portfolio, but also just most companies I interview, see their stocks trading at sort of this 52-week lows. So if the pension funds and generalist investors are not yet there and don't have that appetite to come in and quote unquote save the space, and the Canadian government is focused on giving money and assistance to critical mineral operators only, who or what will take us out of the bear market in gold equities and just precious metals equities?
M&A. It's going to be M&A. There has to be consolidation. We cannot have 10 companies paying for 10 CEOs and 10 CFOs. We need to have one that will advance things. And once that happens, and instead of having 1,000 companies, we have like 30, then the money will be allocated to the 30 companies that can actually execute a plan and that are not going to be sitting down in the chairs without doing anything.
That's quite aggressive, quite an aggressive M&A outlook. I mean, from 1,000, which is what the listed issuers are. What, from 1,000 to 30, you see?
Yeah, it has to be.
What kicks this off? Like, what happens? What has to happen?
We need the first company to start doing the rolling, and you will see that there is a lot of them that will be wanna be part of that one, because that one is the only one that will start going up, because it's the only one transacting, the only one doing something. But what's the worst that can happen to you as a shareholder is that your money is stuck in a company that doesn't do anything, and you cannot even take it out. It's like, guys, you're only paying salaries. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, but it's someone has to blink first.
Will do. Don't worry.
Who blinks? When? How does it happen? There's a bunch of things that, like, I'm sure it will happen eventually, but when? How?
No, it will start this year. And already started. We have been part of that with Moneta and Nighthawk, and it will not stop there. We will continue aggressively looking for other assets and putting as many resources as possible there. This is a matter of just being bigger. Bigger is better. When you're a $500 million company, you can raise $50 million. You have diluted your shareholders in 10%, and you can actually execute a plan. When you're $1 million or $3 million company, if you raise 10%, it's $300,000. You cannot put more than 1,000 meters in the ground of drilling. Simple.
Yeah, and nobody cares, and that's why we're seeing these sort of prospector type of deals. Where that's something else I wanted to ask you about. Where smaller companies.
If these $3 million companies, when they raise $1 million, tell me how much money the executives are putting into the ground.
Hmm. It's true.
How many companies have like us 5% owned by the CEO? 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Well, what do you think of these prospector type of deal where it's small companies, they don't have money to drill their own assets, so they bring in
That's a
new
great
ones
model.
or
That's a different model. That's a model we stake, we do a little bit of work, and then we sell properties. That's fine. That's the prospector's model. But the other one is I want to be an explorationist, but you don't want to put money, but you want them to give you money, and you're still $3 or $4 million, and you're not getting the permits, and you're not drilling, but you keep charging a salary. I mean, that's bad corporate governance.
Yeah. That's exactly what I mean, is that not specifically the prospectors who've been doing this for a long time, but the exploration companies who have sort of been pushed into this prospector model where they just don't have money. They are not able to raise money, so they dilute on the asset level instead of diluting on the equity level.
That's an alternative. Or again, you look for someone that can consolidate you, and you look for 5 of them and do that. Like we did that in 2015 in the bottom of the market with Oban. We were a $10 million company. We did a merger of 5. It was 6 at some point. We lost 1, and we became a $100 million company. And from there, Jose Vizquerra was formed, and now it's $1 billion. So the model of being bigger works, and bigger is better. It is there, and then you call the attention of the majors. Then you are really working into something.
You say that it's going to start this year, and that's very interesting to me because I know you're not a macro expert, so maybe even more helpful to get your thoughts on this because people who do follow macro too closely, so always actually my experience.
When are the U.S. elections?
Right? Yeah.
When is that? Next year?
This year, actually.
So when are the interest rates start coming down?
Well, I don't know.
If they don't come down, the Democrats lose the elections. So they have to come down.
Okay.
And if it comes down, from the moment comes the first peak down, count 3 months, gold is up. And people comes back again into the industry.
Well, that's a simple game plan.
If Biden wins, we're going to see a rocket going up in critical metals.
Why? How come?
Because he has been promoting that forever. And if Trump wins, we'll see gold rallying like crazy. Because you have to look for safety.
Oh, okay. But then, irrespective of the economy, I mean, if there's a recession or something along those lines, you still think that the election matters most?
Well, I think recession will need to reactivate the economy, and you only reactivate the economy by allowing people to have more debt and can be making investments. By doing that, you need to bring down the interest rates. The moment you bring down the interest rates, people are going to start spending more. Then people are going to have more jobs, and people are going to start raising the thing, and then we get back into a post-COVID idea.
Yeah. So
2024 has to be a transformational year of something happening. I don't know it's as aggressive as I'm saying, but something will happen for sure.
And that something is that M&A that you talked about. Okay.
That will happen concurrently because no one has you would never see a major company buying in the downside. It's just too much work for them. They only buy when they get strong, when they feel strong. And they only feel strong when the prices are up and they're making money and they see the cash coming in, their share price going up, and they believe that it's cheaper to buy companies then. They have always done the same thing. Goldcorp at the time when they bought Cerronero out of Andean Gold, I think was called, for $3.7 billion was at the peak of gold. Agnico bought Detour at the peak. They have never bought at the bottom. Never, unfortunately. They should have. They would have made way more money, but they have never done that.
Well, so if they're buying at the top and they're not buying right now, you'd almost think that right now we should be at the bottom.
I think we're at the bottom. I
Do
don't know
you-
how bottom, but we are at the bottom.
Yeah, the bottom sometimes keeps bottoming for too long.
I don't know if it's rock bottom, but we're at the bottom.
Yeah. Good point. Do you ever look at any type of deals in Europe, because Europe is a stable jurisdiction to challenge,
We
more
are.
challenged than Canada, but
We're starting to see a lot of movement now in Spain, which we have not seen it before, and that's very interesting. And we see some deals now panning out in Germany, and it's no surprise because suddenly, when things gets very bad, people reminds that hey, there was mining, and we can actually do something out of this, and we can find prosperity. We remember what happened in the early 1900s and in the late 1800s, and man, life is as cyclical as you can ask for. We still have summer, we still have winter, we still have spring, and we have autumn. And that happens in economy, and that happens in the life of people, and that happens in the wealth of people as well. If you don't plant, you would not collect. If it's just life. It's the same, and this gold thing repeats every time there is a recession. There is a bull market. Every single time. Happened in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, 2000, 2008, 2014, or 10, and then 2020 with the pandemic, with the pandemic.
yeah.
And if we review the Spanish pandemic, was no different from the pandemic we live.
Sure hope you're right, because I read an article on
things repeats.
Last week, I believe, was it, that I read an article on mining.com that said something along the lines that if we replace some of the animal products with alternative protein, that could free up a bunch of land for windmills and stuff like that to generate renewable energy. So stuff like that always scares me. So hope you're right, and I hope it moves towards a better place. When I say Europe, though, I was mostly talking about sort of the Nordic countries that are opening up, and that's where really there is little attention, because in Norway, for example, specifically, there's, I believe, 2 or 3 listed mining related companies. Do you think that's forever going to stay that way, or are we going to see a boom up there as well?
I know very little about the Nordic places. I do know a little bit more about Finland. There was a gold rush in Finland in the 1800s. There has been plenty of discoveries there, and now Agnico is there with one of the most I would say novel mines, in the sense that it has all the technology that you can imagine. And I will not be surprised if we will see more. And I think there is a bunch of Canadian companies doing exploration in Finland. So I will not be surprised that could happen more in Sweden or Norway or Denmark. Certainly from a geological setting, there is no reason to believe why there is no gold there or copper. In fact, one of the most, I don't know if it's Poland, but in one of those, I think it was one of the Nordic places, but it was one of the most efficient copper mines out there. Maybe I'm confusing with one of the Eastern Europeans, but I think there's a chance. All how it transformed is to cost, and in the Norwegian, in the European Nordic countries, the cost is higher because the cost of living is higher.
Yeah.
So there you have to wait. What do you prefer?